Hi there, this is Axel from the Epiloge team. We have built a web app that is basically for building your network with your work and knowledge. And this is one of the first videos where I want to show you some things that how we implemented certain little elements of our app. Our app is built in the front end in Vue.js, and this very first thing I want to show you is exactly about that. And that's when you go to our front page, you see that we have something which is called lazy loading installed. And that means that if you scroll down, then we get a few examples of articles and projects. And for instance, a few people as well. You can see that there's a spinner, and then you get the people loaded only after somebody scrolls down the page. So how do we do that? We have a Vue.js front page here. This is a rather large template, but you can see that it starts with, for instance, this welcome page, build your network. That's all what's going on here. And if you scroll down and have the first elements about share your papers and so on, which you can see here. And then the first question is, so how do we load these things lazily, these projects and these users? The trick, if you want to look at it here in this file, the trick is very, very simple to actually add. You add an event listener, a normal window event listener, which you can see here, when this template, this page is mounted. For those people who haven't used Vue.js that much, you will maybe have seen it, but don't really know why there is something called mounted and created. What's the difference? So created is what most people use to just put code there when the page loads. But the problem is sometimes you want to have elements, so the actual descriptive elements here on the HTML tags and so on, all loaded before you want to do anything. And that's when you need mounted. So you call this next tick, which means that the mounted is over, and then you add an event listener. This event listener will basically say, okay, whenever a user scrolls here, starts scrolling, then we should go to a function which we define below, and that's called onScroll in my case. Never forget, if you add an event listener in Vue.js, you always want to destroy it before this whole thing. You want to delete it again, remove it before you change somewhere else. So if I go to another page here, for instance, the login page, and I want to go back, then I don't want to have a second event listener, but I want to keep the first, destroy the first event listener. When I go back, then the user the code just creates a second one. So what's in this onScroll method? So if you go to methods, you can just scroll down. That's the last method I included here. And the trick is here to say, when I scroll here, where should the data that I want to load here be triggered? So I want to scroll down here to, for instance, people on Epiloge, to this element. And I want to say, okay, if I'm here, then at this point, please, computer, please load the data. This works actually quite easily. The trick is to get a reference to an element in our template. So in this case, I named something users heading for the users, and I say the reference is users, so I have to find where my reference users is in my template. I go up there and I see, oh, okay, the people on Epiloge thing, so what's starting here, that actually has a reference in the outer div here, reference users. So all you need to do is just put in ref and users here, and so we have an element which we can get here in onScroll, so we can see if the user scrolls down. So the next thing is, let's forget about the examples. So the examples are basically these things, but we want to just look at the users when they load. So I'll show it to you again. So we refresh. we scroll down. First, there's a lazy loading for these. Now we scroll down and you see it's loading, and now the users that we want to show here are there. You basically say, okay, if we find the element is just a safeguard that if there's any problem with loading or something, then we don't get an issue here. So, but if we have this users heading, which we defined above under the ref, then we want to get in pixels, how many pixels are from here to the top of the screen. So in this case, when you start here, it's actually down there. It's actually far down there, and you get a lot of pixels there. And once you scroll down, it's getting less and less. And then at some point, it's in the screen, which means we know that the window inner Hive is something, let's say 1,000 pixels, but the difference from here to the top is less. It's like here, it's like 300 pixels or something. We want to just check the difference, so we just say, okay, if this is, let's say, 800 pixels and the inner Hive is 1,000 pixels, and the difference is either you can define 0. In my case, I just did a little bit more, so it's minus 50. In that case, just lazily get the data. And that's what this actually does. So just for purposes of you seeing this effect, I put in a timeout here. So we can put in the timeout at, for instance, 2000 milliseconds. So when we reload the page, you will see that it takes a while until it loads. That's the 2 seconds, and then it gets it from the API. But we can remove this because we actually don't really need it. So we can just have this get users writing. This is a function I have defined above. That's get users writing. Can have a different method, of course. But the only thing that does is basically say, okay, we need a variable that does the spinner that we had before. So this variable, when you go up to the template here and you want to see why this is spinning, then it's basically, I have a component which says loading container small. And in this loading container, there's just a spinner for users to see there is something loading. And once that's done, then we have we just basically show the data that we have we've gotten. So basically the users here. And how do you? That's it basically. So if you want to, I mean, if you already have a backend and you know to get your data like Axios and so on, then you can easily use this. That's actually not the only thing. As I showed you a very simple way to use this lazy loading, but it's much more common actually on a lot of websites where you have a list of people, for instance, and then there is a lazy loading when you scroll down. So if you go, for instance, on LinkedIn and you want to see in my network, I want to see something, I want to see a few people as a list. So I go on see all here, then and you scroll down, then whenever I get down, then it just lazily loads more people. And that's exactly what you can do with this method as well. It's very easy. So you just have your list of people, and then, for instance, in our case, I say Julia. I've got Julias. If there would be more Julias, then there would be a load more function. If people scroll down, then it would automatically load more Julias in this case. Good. The other two things you should probably not forget. If you already have a store, so for instance Vuex or any other solution that you have, so store, if you don't know what it is, it means that if a user refreshes the store is blank, but if you just go to another site, for instance, you go to a user and you go back, the user goes back, then it doesn't have to reload this whole thing. It remembers that we have examples already loaded in store, and it gets them out of the store when it hits the site again. So what we do is in create it, I just go to the store examples or the stored users here. I get it from the store, and I assign them. I say, okay. So if we have stored users, then we don't really have to get the users again from the API. This means this I create the users from the API, and that's basically what we do. If they're so pretty much it. If there are any questions you have or things, comments, please just comment there. Otherwise, you can always. So this is one of the first. This is one of the first tutorials we are making here for elements that we used on Epiloge. If you want to see this live, you can just go to www.epiloge.com and see it live. And if you want to connect with me on Epiloge, you can just sign in. It's very easy process, and find me on Epiloge and connect me. Thanks, and see you soon.